Waterfall, the CCW podcast.
Hello and welcome to Waterfall. It's the water saving podcast. It's the podcast that helps you save water, save money, help the environment and combat climate change. Now, I am not alone. I am here with the one and only, the legendary Karen Gibbs. Hello, Karen.
Hello, Mike.
How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
So we've got a guest coming on.
I know. We're on a bit of a roll with this, aren't we?
Yeah, where's your excitement level on a scale of 1 to 10?
Oh, 7.5.
7.5. Well, let's hope that our guest will live up to your mighty, pretty good billing that you've given him. But we do have a guest coming on, Mike Kendon from the Met Office. Very exciting, a real scientist all the way from the Met Office. And because we've talked about the Met Office, you can play guess that today's episode is all about the weather. In particular, Tom can cut that bit out. He never does though. If you ever say Tom will cut that out, he keeps it in.
There's a lot on the cutting room floor, don't worry, Mike.
To be fair, we forgot to introduce producer Tom, who, he's one of the gang. He keeps the wheels on this operation. And he's always there, wherever you are, lurking in the shadows.
Everyone, I'm here.
There he is. So today's episode is all about the weather we've been experiencing this year.
And we've actually had a question in from a listener, Mike.
Oh, I love it when a listener gets in touch.
Well, Jenny's asked if we can have a winter drought.
Ooh.
So that would be a good question to put to Mike.
Yeah, well, let's see what Mike has to say about that. How did Jenny get in touch?
Jenny emailed podcast@ccwater.org.uk.
So that is a brilliant way for all of you to get in touch with us, and we do promise to reply to every email. And if they're interesting, you can help shape the show like a number of you have.
CCW, passionate about championing the best interests of everyone who uses water, now and in the future.
So Karen, cast your mind back to the episode which was all about nature, which I think was episode 11, which was the nature of water. And if you remember, we had a listener in touch talking about a German social media post. Do you remember that one? Do you remember what it was about?
Oh, yes, I do.
Do you want to remind me what it was about?
Well, I'd rather forget it, but it was to do with peeing in the shower, I seem to remember.
Yes. And now you may recall that I read out the German social media post in German, in very poor German, but for which I was very apologetic.
Yes, how could we forget it?
I did make a throwaway comment that we've never been in the German charts and we never will. Well, I've got news, exciting news. The very day that we released that episode, Waterfall got in the German podcast chart and it stayed there for about a week. Now, all that tells me is that Germans have a wonderful sense of humour, because that's the only explanation. So, German listeners, we salute you. The podcast team are in awe of you. So well done, and thank you for not taking yourselves and ourselves too seriously. So, Waterfall, we are about saving water all the time, whatever the weather. And that's been one of the key messages. It's always good to save water, save money, help the environment, combat climate change, do it all the time. It's a win-win-win-win-win.
The only thing that I would say is that obviously the weather does matter. When we've had a year like we've had this summer, it adds a degree of urgency to what we need to do, because quite clearly, not only were water resources running low, but the dry weather and those really hot temperatures were having a really dramatic impact on the environment.
Absolutely, Karen. And let's find out more about the weather and the weather we've been experiencing this year. And let's bring in our guest.
Be sure to head back through the archives and check out all the past episodes of Waterfall.
Well, we love a good guest on Waterfall, and it's great pleasure to talk to Mike Kendon, who's from the Met Office. That's a bit special. Hello, Mike.
Hello, Mike. Yes, pleasure to be here.
You can't have too many Mikes in one room.
No, absolutely.
Good. I like Mike already. Mike's already my favourite guest by a long way. So, Mike, you are a climate information scientist working for the National Climate Information Centre at the Met Office. Is that right?
I am indeed, yes. NCIC for short.
NCIC, I am sure that sounds much cooler than the National Climate Information Centre. That sounds like your crime fighters. Do you have a fluorescent light that you walk around shining everywhere to look for clues?
Only at home.
So look, we are seeing a year of very wacky weather, crazy weather, however you want to describe it. But is that just journalists being sensational, or has this really been an unusually dry year?
Yeah, well, I mean, every year is different, and so we produce this report called State of the UK Climate every year for the last 7 years, something like that. Now I've slightly lost track, but to be honest, every year there is pretty interesting weather happening somewhere in the UK at some point in the year. And obviously this year's no exception. I mean, probably the most exceptional thing this year really has been the extraordinary heat wave that we had in July, where we reached 40 degrees for the first time, which was really a moment of climate history for the UK, with weather records not just broken. Normally when weather records are broken, they're broken by a small amount, but here they were absolutely smashed. So that's the most remarkable thing. But yes, it has been, as well as having that heat wave, it has been a dry year. Obviously, the rainfall patterns vary through the year, but we have had a number of very dry months. January, April, July, and August have all had less than half the normal rainfall that we'd expect.
Yeah, I mean, people think UK is a wet country, and is that really true or not?
As ever, the answer to that really is it depends. So the annual average rainfall for the UK is just over a metre, 1,100 millimetres. But there's obviously this massive regional variation depending where you are. So, if you're in the north and the west, up in Western Scotland, the Highlands get 3 to 4 meters of rain a year, which makes them very, very wet. And of course, that happens because they're up in the north and the west. They're really influenced strongly by the jet stream. You get all these fronts coming in from the Atlantic. You've got the mountains that pushes the air up over the mountains as it comes in on a westerly flow. And basically, we get tons of rain up there. So there's no shortage of, we got more rain than they know what to do with. And if you go walking up there, you're pretty lucky to get a dry day in the West Highlands. So it does happen. But conversely, of course, across much of the southeast of England, it's very, very much drier. So the annual average rainfall down there is more like 700 to 800 millimetres a year. In some places, it's 600 millimetres a year or less. So, and actually those areas, the most populated areas of the country. So London obviously has about 650 millimetres of rain, which is pretty low. I mean, actually that is, it makes it drier than Perth in West Australia.
Not Perth in Scotland.
not Perth in Scotland, no. And comparable to places like Israel, for example.
So what you're saying is essentially the thirstiest parts of the country actually are also the driest parts of the country.
Yes, broadly speaking, that is true.
And that's on an average sense then. So if you chuck in unusually dry weather and, as you said, exceptionally hot weather, then that can lead to problems when it comes to water demand.
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, that's obviously been the focus of a lot of people's attention, quite rightly, this year. A lot of our attention as well has been on the dry and the extraordinarily hot weather. But you look at now we're moving into autumn, and you see September has been average-ish rainfall. Does that mean we're kind of out of the woods when it comes to water availability?
Well, it's a good question, and we have had some wet weather recently. I think what you've got to look at here is you've got to think of the hydrological cycle, the overall annual hydrological cycle, which really takes into account the fact that in a normal situation we have lower rainfall in the summer months and higher rainfall in the winter months. And of course, the winter months are an important time for recharging water resources, for refilling reservoirs, and in particular for the groundwater, bringing up the groundwater resources back up in the southeast. And so you need considerable amount of rain over the winter period to do that. So if we look at how much rain we've had so far this year, we've had, for example, for the UK overall, we've had, this is as of the stats as of the 25th of October, the UK has had 65% of the 1991-2020 average rainfall. So that's about 2/3. But if we look regionally, it's less than that in some areas. So England, we've had 58%. Southern England, we've had 54%. And there's some counties in England, like Kent, Suffolk, Norfolk. Some of these areas have only had about half the normal rainfall we'd expect at this, half of the annual rainfall total. That's what we've had. So there's a lot to be made up in the rest of the year. And the chances are, and yes, unless we get a very wet autumn, that we will have significant deficits going through into the winter period. So although we've had wet weather recently, for example, in the last week, we've had maybe 30 to 50 millimetres, perhaps more in some parts across the southeast of England, fairly widely, as we've had more of these frontal systems bringing in rain. We still need quite a lot of rainfall to bring back up that deficit.
Wow, I mean, those facts there are really compelling. And do you know what? Those numbers tell a really clear story that, just 1 month of average or slightly above average rain is not going to make up for months and months and months of lower than average rain. So that's super helpful to hear. Well, super helpful, but also to explain what's going on. I'm not necessarily helpful if you're actually looking for some water. The water sector and water companies tend to use 1976 as a bit of a reference year because that was a year of an extraordinary drought in many parts across the UK. How does this year shape up when you look at what's gone on relative to 1976?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. So 1976 drought, many sort of older listeners will obviously remember 1976. I was only 3 years old then. So basically, the benchmark drought against which all other droughts tend to be compared. So the thing about this is it was a fairly long duration drought. It lasted from May 1975 to August 1976. And in fact, that 16-month period is the driest 16 months in that series. So it's remarkably dry. So that drought broke quite dramatically in September 1976, actually. If we look at the stats for this year, January to August this year for England, we've had 75% of annual average rainfall. If we compare that to 1976, for the same period, England had 62%. So it was substantially dry, and that was a much more severe drought. That also obviously coincided with a very hot summer as well. And although actually the summer temperatures in 1976, we didn't see such extreme temperatures as we've seen this year. This year we've seen 40 degrees. In 1976, we only reached 35. But actually it was the number of days that reached 25 to 30, pushing 35, that was really extraordinary in 1976. And of course, the other thing about that drought is that it came off the back of a dry winter 1975 to 1976 too. So that was a long duration drought, and this we're not this is nothing like as severe as that. Obviously, you think of that drought, there were standpipes in the streets and so on.
So this could, but this could go on. This, if we had a dry winter and a dry spring, we could be getting to those kind of levels of low levels of rainfall.
Yeah, I mean, the key thing is whether we have dry conditions extending over the winter. We've already talked about this annual cycle, the hydrological cycle, and thinking about what happens over a year or more. Obviously, when we think of the UK, the amount of rainfall that we get through the year, it varies very much by season. So obviously we get more rainfall in the winter half year than in the summer half year. How does that vary across the country? That's quite interesting. If we look, for example, at the northwest Scotland, we have a very large variation in our annual cycle. So we typically get a lot more rainfall in the winter than we do in the summer, and that's because the rain is predominantly driven by frontal systems coming off the Atlantic. If we look at the southeast, we do get that annual cycle in rainfall, but it's much more suppressed. And the reason for that is that in the southeast, much more of the rain that we get is convective in nature, and it comes from showers and things coming in from unsettled conditions like that, rather than frontal systems from Atlantic loads coming in. But even so, the summer rainfall, less of that gets into the ground and into the water resources because of evaporation. Obviously, we've got higher temperatures in the summer, and so much more of that water getting into the groundwater resources and in the reservoirs. It's the winter period that's really important for that.
Yeah, so it's watch out basically and see what happens this winter, because it's going to be critical to what happens, next spring and summer in terms of water supply. So one question that I think everyone wants to ask is, is what we've seen this year driven by climate change? These extremes, particularly extremes in temperature, is it climate change? Can you say that?
Well, look, so we said I work in NCIC, National Climate Information Centre. So we look at the observations fundamentally. So we're not here thinking about models, what's happening in the future. We're talking about what's happening now. What can we see already in our observations? And we can already see that our climate is changing. The UK's climate is changing. Climate change is happening now. So how do we see that? If we look at the latest decade, it's been 1 degree warmer than 1961, 1990. So we've had about a degree of warming for the UK. And that's broadly consistent with what we've seen globally. As we know, CO2 levels and other greenhouse gases are rising in the atmosphere. CO2 went through 400 parts per million relatively recently. That's the highest level for, these are really scary numbers for 800,000 years. And this is a major crisis, really. But what we are seeing in the UK is consistent with what we are seeing globally in terms of warming. But of course, the other thing is, as the climate warms, it also tends to get wetter. So that is because basically a warmer atmosphere has the capability to hold more moisture at roughly 7% per degree. So the most recent decade, for example, for the UK, has been 10% wetter than 1961 to 1990. So we're seeing both a warming trend in the UK and a wetting trend. So we might ask, if it's getting wetter, well, why do we need to worry about drought? Well, the thing is that it's not just the fact that we're getting wetter. The distribution of rainfall through the year may be changing. So we're kind of heading towards a scenario of having wetter winters and drier summers. And when it rains, we may get more intense rainfall. And that type of rainfall may actually be problematic in some ways too, in that it's more liable to cause things like flash flooding. But it may tend to run off more rather than be able to work its way into the ground and down into those aquifers. So the situation is quite complex. But in terms of the observations, in terms of drought, have we seen evidence for more drought in terms of the observations in the UK? The answer to that is there's not really any significant trends outside natural variability. Look, there are some major droughts in the UK historical record. Obviously 1976, but there are other drought years too, 1921, 19 to 22, 1933 to 1934, for example. But there's no indications in the observations yet that we are seeing more severe droughts in the UK. But of course, drought is a very complicated thing. There are different types of drought. We think about what is a drought, and you want a simple definition. But of course, the aspects of drought, we think of how long it lasts, so what the duration is. Then there is the spatial scale, how large it is. What sort of an area? Are we talking about one county, or are we talking about half of the UK? And then there is the intensity. So are we talking about, rainfall being 75% or 50% of what we would normally expect? Or are we basically talking about pretty much no rainfall at all? And those things will, those characteristics will then link to the type of drought it is, whether it is, for example, an agricultural drought, which is basically a lack of moisture in the soil, making it, for example, hard for farmers to grow crops, or whether it is a hydrological drought, which is more about longer term water resources, and then the socioeconomic impacts of that leading on to impacts on users being able to use things like hose pipes and so on. So it's a complex situation.
Well, Karen, our co-host, is not in the room right now, but she would she's very much of the mind to answer most questions with "it depends."
Yeah, well, so, we got an NCIC. We got the catchphrase in our team is really just a quick question. So we can easily get just a quick question, but actually often the answer is just a long and complicated answer. And the reality is that monitoring the climate is quite a complex endeavor, and a lot of these things that we're looking at are by their nature quite complex.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I know you're a climate scientist, you're not a forecaster, but I've got to ask, do we know what the winter might bring? What's the seasonal forecast saying?
Well, what will the future hold? I mean, to be clear, we do present a seasonal forecast. But what I would say here is, I mean, obviously our forecast models have improved great. There's a lot of research in this area. They've improved greatly over the years. So looking ahead over a timescale of 5 to 10 days, the lead time for the accuracy of our forecasts is substantially improved as a result of the supercomputing capability, the improvements in modeling, and so on.
I think your forecasting accuracy took a real kick upwards, improved after I left the Met Office. I think it had something to do with me leaving. Yeah,
right.
I think that's
okay. That's before, I can't comment. That's before my time. I mean, but what I would say is that when we look, we do produce a forecast for what's called a civil contingency planners, but typically that gives shows a distribution of possible outcomes, but actually that distribution tends to generally be shifted only a relatively small amount from the climatology. So I don't really want to comment too much on what we might expect to see over this coming winter, because there is obviously a very large amount of uncertainty with that. And that goes with the fact that we have a very large variability in the UK's climate. We're a small nation at the edge of continental Europe. There is a lot of uncertainty, and it's not easy to predict these things. Longer term, looking ahead, longer term, clearly our climate is going to continue to warm. How much it warms depends on what we do next in terms of emitting greenhouse gases and so on. And obviously, as it warms, the pattern of rainfall that we would get will change too. I mean, as summer temperatures increase above 35 degrees and sort of levels of evapotranspiration increase, I think there's an increased likelihood of shorter, more intense droughts, like perhaps we had in summer 2018. I think one thing's for sure, whatever risk there will be, that risk is likely to be more severe the more we go down this route of warming. So when you put this together with obviously the things that we've already talked about, the fact that the rainfall that we expect in the UK in the southeast on an average basis is relatively low. We have a high population density and quite a high demand. Obviously, this is something that we need to keep a very close eye on.
Before you go, Mike, we do ask all our guests on Waterfall about their own personal water use. And so do you know what your own personal water use is? What do you use in your house per person?
Yeah, I wouldn't put a specific number on it, but I was thinking more about the things that we do. I mean, in fact, also that's more tricky because we've literally just moved house. But what I would say in general, I mean, I'll talk about water and about other things more generally, actually, other aspects of consumption more generally. Starting with water, I think it's obviously important that we think about what we're using, you know, how many times we're doing the washing up, that sort of thing. We're using a shower rather than a bath. We just moved house. I discovered that the previous owners, the water butt was all blocked with debris and was overflowing. So I fixed that. So that'll mean that we can use a water butt again. When my two daughters were very small and we used a baby bath, don't use soap in it, and then you finish with the water in the baby bath, then you just tip it on the garden, especially in the summer, rather than tip it, so you're thinking constructively about these things. And obviously that water is important to think about how we use it.
Oh, great advice there, Mike. I think you could be making your own podcast series, Mike's Guide to Sustainable Living, because, loads of sound advice in there. Producer Tom, who's lurking in the background, as always, his ears have pricked up. He's thinking another podcast in the making. But yeah, lots of great advice there. I don't know, Mike, how I'm going to handle your answer though on our leaderboard of people's personal water consumption. I did not answer.
You can edit out most of it.
No, we're keeping all these bits in, Mike. Look, it's been fantastic having you on. Loads of brilliant stuff that we've talked about and loads of insight there. So thank you.
Enjoying the show? Please consider leaving a 5-star rating on iTunes and Spotify.
So that was Mike. It's always great to have someone on the show who knows what they're talking about. Isn't it, Karen?
It is, absolutely.
But let's go right back to the start of the show to answer Jenny's question. Well, there can be a winter drought. And don't be fooled by seasonal variation. Obviously, in the UK, it's wetter in the winter than it is in the summer, but that's no guarantee there'll be enough water. Especially, as Mike said, this year, we've got an awful lot of catching up to do in terms of replenishing our water resources that in many places are really struggling.
Yeah, and I think, this is one of the things that I think is really important for us all to be aware of, that it's going to take quite a lot of very heavy, consistent rain to really get our water resources to where they need to be. So it's a kind of case of watch this space, really.
So we're not out of the woods yet, and the jury's still out.
Yes, I think you're right.
That's all we've got time for, really, in this episode of Waterfall. So you can get in touch with the show. We would love to hear from you. Don't forget, you can check out our back catalogue and join us again. We've got some fantastic episodes planned. So it's goodbye from me, Mike.
And it's goodbye from me, Karen.